By popular demand, you guys voted and chose, and you guys chose the time that a fairy set something on fire. I will say it was a really close call. It's pretty much split down the middle. There was, I think, one vote more for fairies than there was for the dinosaur at church camp story, but I will be telling both of them, and I'll probably drop both of them today as a little special treat for you. When I was around 9 years old, my mom started dating this guy named Ralph. To this day, my sister and I don't like Ralph. If we think we see him in a store, we'll just straight turn around and go the other way and leave all our stuff in the store. There are a lot of spooky things about Ralph, and there will be more Ralph stories, but this one is about the night that the fairies set Ralph's house on fire. Ralph was rich, but he was one of those rich guys who acts like they're incredibly poor, to the point where you're like, why do you have the money? You can't take it with you. When we moved in, his house wasn't decorated, his yard wasn't kept. Ralph was the kind of cheap where he had the money, but if we went out to fast food, he would make us get a hamburger instead of a cheeseburger because the cheeseburger added 30 cents, and he would say, we have cheese at home. The kind of guy who buys lights from Dollar Tree, not because that's what he can afford, but because that's what he wants to spend, and he'd rather change out a light twice a month than spend the extra $6 on a good light that might last for a year. Ralph's yard was huge. It was probably the one saving grace for the entire time that my sister and I lived there. We liked to spend our time outside. We play at the Tree of Life, which I've got stories about that. We would play at the field. We would play hide and go seek with our pug in the field. We would go get pollywogs down in the creek. We would go swimming all the time, and he also had a jacuzzi. My mother is not a water person. She's maybe gotten into a pool maybe 3 or 4 times in my entire life that I can remember, and even then she didn't swim. She just kind of stood there, you know, maybe with a drink in her hand or something. But my mom is not what I would consider a water lover. That's why this night stuck in my mind so well, because my mom wanted to go in the jacuzzi. So Ralph was like, yeah, let's make it jacuzzi night. He took a little tiny box TV and plugged it in out there. I don't even know what we were watching, but the fact that we were watching TV while we were in a jacuzzi was amazing. He put a little bit of dish soap in the water. We had bubbles. And honestly, this night was a kind of good night. Looking back on it, I think he put the bubbles in the water so that my sister and I couldn't see what he was trying to do to my mom. But my mom wasn't having it because she wasn't trying to get fresh in the same water that her 2 children were in. And Ralph was trying to basically pour as much wine down her as he possibly could to try to get her into a state where she didn't care. But my mom, she cared too much. She wasn't going to let him have his way in front of us, if that makes sense. Sometime during the night, we're watching something on the little TV, and my sister and I are making whirlpools, and Ralph is being gross, and my mom is trying to be chill and enjoy her night and watch the TV and play with her kids and look at the stars and enjoy her night in the hot tub. I see off in the distance a glowing figure about this big, and it was a perfectly round little ball, but it had just a wisp coming off of the top of it, and I noticed it instantly as Igneous the Fire Fairy. I have seen fairies since I was a very small child. I have books that I've written about them. I have papers that I've written on them. I have documented what I could. I've gone to different kinds of fairy expos and talked to people when I was young and gave adults information on what's going on in the fairy world. I can remember going to Jess Friend's Tea Parlor and having a whole group of adults surrounding me going like this, listening to my stories, because it was a fairy festival and I was telling them of the fairies they had in their very own yard that they couldn't see, but I was clearly seeing with my own eyes. Igneous is one of the first fairies I ever met. She is a fire fairy. I've never seen her catch anything on fire. She is just made of fire. That's the only way that I can describe her. She is a little ball of fire. There's a face within the fire, but her herself doesn't really have that much of a form. She's more of if you ever saw Flame Boy or Water Boy, it's there's just a little flame with a face in it. That's kind of what we got going on. She can kind of elongate and make almost the shape of a body, but I've really never seen her take a full form the way I've seen other fairies take full form. I'm pointing out to my mom, and Mom, look over there. You see that? That's Igneous the Fire Fairy. And Mom goes, hey Ralph, look over there. There's a weird little light floating around. And she was floating back and forth. She was doing her thing. She was over by our grapes and the fence. And she was definitely trying to get our attention. I kept telling my mom, Igneous wouldn't be here if there was a reason for her to be here. Like, I think we need to watch out. Like, there might be a fire somewhere. There might be something going on. There's, why is she here? Like, she's showing herself to an adult even. And my mom's thinking, what'd she say? I think she said it was a glow bug or something like that. She thought it's just a glow bug. I'm like, we live in California. There are not glow bugs here. That's nice to think about, but they just don't exist. So the night progresses, we continue to do whatever we're doing, and eventually Igneous goes away. I watched her for what I want to say is a good 15 minutes, kind of floating around, checking things out, and then she just disappeared. Around 2 a.m., I get woken up to our dog Sebastian barking. Barking, 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 barking. And then I hear the sliding glass door open that goes to Ralph's bedroom, and I hear Ralph get out and go, "Shut the F up, shut the F up, what are you barking at?" And then I hear him go, "Jesus!" He was saying Jesus because our roof was on fire. We had a wooden tile roof house, and our entire roof was on fire. And not just any part of our roof, the part that went directly over his bedroom and me and my sister's bedroom. They were engulfed in flames. Ralph calls 911. In a short amount of time, we have firemen there. They were taking us out of our home. They're spraying water all over it. They were able to save the home. They traced the source of the fire down to the jacuzzi. So Ralph had this wooden lean-to kind of up over that he had made over the jacuzzi heating elements. So like, how all pools have a filtration system and you kind of have like a little shack or something over it? Well, he had built his out of really old, really dry wood, and it had been there for over 20 years. But it was old and dry when he made the dang thing. So after we ran the jacuzzi all night, it was hot, and it was enough to catch that wood on fire. Was Igneous the cause of the fire? Did she set the fire? No, I don't think so. I think she was truly trying to warn us. I think that she saw that the potential for fire was there. I think that she's naturally drawn to fire because she is a fire element, fire fairy, fire being. Some might call that a salamander. But I believe that she was there to warn us, and we just didn't take the warning. We didn't take the hint. I could see her, but I wasn't walking up to her, so I didn't know what the beep she wanted. And the adults weren't taking anything I said seriously, so that was never going to help. In all the things I've ever encountered, encountering fairies is always my very favorite. Partly because it's one of the first things I ever encountered, so it brings a lot of nostalgia back. But also because every time I encounter a fairy, especially in my adulthood, I know that I'm doing something really right in my life because they very, very, very rarely show themselves. Especially if you're not somebody who's on a true and decent path. I'm not going to say I don't ever mess up. I'm not going to say I don't ever make mistakes. Of course I do. I am in a flesh and blood body. Of course I make mistakes. But my intentions are pure and my heart is pure, and I go through each day trying to make the most out of the situation, not just for myself, but for the people around me. And I believe that that's the purity that fairies seek to show themselves to. I'm curious, have you ever come in contact with a fairy? If so, leave a comment below. Also, have you ever been in a fire? That's pretty scary. Even though that we were okay, the smoke was billowing in, having the smoke damage in the house was really, really scary, and it could have gone really, really south really, really quickly. My prayers go out to anybody who's had that situation or anybody who's had to suffer through a house fire. Absolutely terrifying. I hope that everybody made it out safe, and my prayers and thoughts are with you.